So our final match here, first and second place for Division Two Hearthstone, is with Louisville's JoopyGoopy or Jaden Looters. Um, he is a 10th grader with an impressive 4-1 record. We saw him earlier, and he is playing against crowa52 from Kearney Catholic, also known in real life as Alan Flick, with an 8-16 record. He is in ninth grade. So we have two very young competitors here in Division Two. We will hop right over to spectating them if you give me a second because I'm not great with the streaming, but we are here. So, JoopyGoopy is again the one we are spectating. He is playing that mage list we saw in the first round, which focuses on hero powers and a more mid-rangey plan here. Crowa52, there's an A there. We have not seen him before. He was in the Wildcat stream if you were watching that. He won his two games as he's here already. It looks like he's running a Cthulhu list. Cthulhu is usually a more mid-rangey deck. He's opening with a Rock Ravager, which is a 5 mana or a 2 mana 5/1. So it does a lot of damage, but it is very weak health wise. And JoopyGoopy just decides to hero power that away and get rid of that early aggression from Crowa. Um, Rock Rager does not line up well against Mage, and we still are not entirely sure what Crowa here is running, but we can presume it's either more mid-rangey or late-gamey than early game plays, simply because of the Cthulhu in his list. And these are the kind of judgments and ideas that you'll be getting in higher level players, assuming what decks your opponent's running based on very small pieces of information that you gain from them. So Crowa is continuing to play taunt minions, which again goes to tell us that he is likely a more late game centered deck. Joopy is using his Scorpion that we've seen in a couple games now to create a spell, create more value, and hopefully use that value to carry him through the mid game in which he seeks to win from. So Crowa, again, still with what we were talking about, continues to put taunt minions up and protect himself. However, JoopyGoopy is playing a high value piece in Jandis Barov here. Jandis is a 6 mana 2/1, which by herself is not great stats. However, when she enters the battlefield when you play her, she summons 2 random 5-cost minions. Now, on its surface, that's an incredible rate. However, one of them, when it takes damage, it dies immediately, as we just saw there, triggered by the Dread Infernal from Crowa, killing the 6 health Fell Soul Jailer. Normally that would not happen except for the effect of Jandis. And it looks like JoopyGoopy is deciding where to go from here now that his early board presence created by Jandis is not there anymore. He's trying to clear off his opponent's things with the Mask of Cthulhu, which does 10 damage randomly split among enemies. Again, random chance based. Unfortunately, it did not clear off any of Crowa's minions and left him with a sizable board presence. Crowa continues to play taunt minions and continues to rely on them to get it to his late game plans and be able to win there. We again see JoopyGoopy take his fallen hero after he uses his hero power, reducing the overall damage he has on field. That's a play mistake that appears to be a little common with Joopy, especially when you consider that you could do an additional damage to the enslaved Fell Lord and end up killing it this turn. Or not this turn now that you've lost it. But that is an order thing that often very high level players will have one or two things that they do incorrectly consistently, even though it's not normally a large play issue there. One of the things that Joopy's looking at is his more late game legendary minion, his finisher, if you will, Mordresh, Fire Eye. It does 10 damage to all enemy minions, but in order to all enemies, yikes. But in order for it to do that, you have to use your hero power. And his deck, which is centered around his hero power for control to get to this point, is very useful in getting that active, and it is currently active. So next turn we could expect to see the Fire Eye, or we could see something entirely different depending on what his opponent does here. And there we saw something that we've touched on before. The Mirror Entity is one of the mage's options as a secret. It triggers when your opponent plays a minion and it summons a copy of it. So it can be a very high damage or high value, high impact card when your opponent plays a large taunt minion, like the Gold Road Grunt that crowa52 just put down. So we just saw Crowa use one of his patented Warlock control pieces here in Hysteria to force an enemy minion to attack randomly. He's using it to clear off his opponent's board and protect himself from that damage it presents. Um, we just saw a second Mask of Cthulhu, killing off quite a few of the minions, but failing to kill off the Desperate Dreadlord, which allows for lifesteal, which is an important healing aspect in this match, especially when JoopyGoopy is doing so much damage to crowa52. crowa52 continues to try to protect himself with more taunt minions. An interesting thing to bring up here is that JoopyGoopy does have a lot of damage that he can just send regardless of taunt as Mage. Mage has options of lots of burn spells here. So that is something that Crow will need to be aware of, and if he can, he should probably heal when he gets to such low health totals as he's at right now. So right here, oh, sorry about that. I'm not going to make object play decisions when our door is open. I don't want to give competitors an unfair advantage here. Sorry about that. The door to the other side of the competition area was left open. But right here, JoopyGoopy has the Mordresh Eye of Fire, which does do 10 damage to all enemies. And because crowa52 was at such a low health, that will kill him because he was unable to heal beforehand. So that is the first round there, going to um, Jaden here in 10th grade. He needs to win one more to take first place, and Crowa or Alan here needs to win 2 games in a row after this in order to take the game. So we are just going to hop right into the next one. We have JoopyGoopy's Demon Hunter list, which we saw earlier, centered around the Illidari Inquisitor, which does a lot of damage to the opponent very quickly, versus the same Warlock list we saw from Crowa, which has lots of taunt minions and a late game plan of Cthulhu and other just beat down value pieces. So this will be a game to see who can control the. Neither one will be doing too much in the mid game. It'll be a race to see who can control, or neither one will be doing too much in the early game. Excuse me, talking is hard. But it will be a game to see who can control the mid game, either with Crowa's taunt minions and card advantage, or JoopyGoopy's various direct damage sources. And then the late game will probably belong to Crowa, so JoopyGoopy will need to take his advantages where he can find them in the mid game. So there's that card advantage that will give Crowa a significant lead after the mid game when the cards start to dwindle in JoopyGoopy's hand. We will see what happens here. With the cards in play, JoopyGoopy currently has the board, while Crowa has been holding onto his resources more often for the late game. Crowa, as we saw earlier, has a lot of taunt minions, And in order for JoopyGoopy to deal damage and hurt him later, he needs his Illidari Inquisitor to be able to attack his opponent's face along with his hero, which is his win condition, as we saw last game. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. If he can beat around the taunts, this should be his final. But if Crowa can continue to protect himself until the late game, it will not. It'll go poorly for JoopyGoopy as we see another removal spell from Crowa clearing off his board and bringing it back to a more equal state. So what we just saw there from Crowa was one of the pieces of Cthulhu, which is a very high value 5 mana card. When you assemble all four of them together, you can create a minion, a 10 mana minion that does 30 damage randomly split. And if you have noticed earlier, the starting health total is 30. So being able to assemble that minion by playing various different cards from your deck and slowly drawing them is the win con, it looks like, for Crowa, unless we see something else. So with that in mind, Crowa's goal to get to the late game and drawing more cards is expertly suited for Warlock, as their hero power does allow them to draw more cards at the cost of life total. JoopyGoopy's hand has a lot of. He has a 7, an 8, and a 9 mana card sitting in there. So that will line up nicely with his next couple of turns if he can continue to use them effectively and clear off his opponent's taunts. It really is just a game of who can control the mid game, which we're seeing right now with Baron Geddon. Um, the most important thing here for Crowa will be to keep up his taunt minions, and JoopyGoopy just wants to be able to send as much damage to the face before he gets Cthulhu'd out of the game with Crowa assembling his combo. So Crow is doing exactly what we said he needed to. He is producing more taunt minions while clearing off Goopy's board consistently. The most important thing will be to continue doing that until you can finally kill him. JoopyGoopy, still trying to beat through the taunts, thinking about what he can do with his hand right here. So Jupy has played his Silas Darkmoon, which is one of the few cards in the game that changes the position of minions on the board. So what he did there was rotate all the minions counterclockwise, giving his opponent Silas Darkmoon, which is just a 4/4, in exchange for his Sheehan Shieldmaster. And what we're seeing from Crowa here is something we haven't seen yet in the tournament. There are cards that allow you to replace your hero with a different one with a strictly different ability. So what he's played here is Lord Jaraxxus, a recently improved card in Hearthstone. His hero power is 2 mana to summon a 6/6. He is a huge value engine that will just simply, if you cannot outright kill the Warlock once they become Jaraxxus, they will continue to outvalue you with 6/6s every turn until you stop being able to play anymore as your health total is reduced to 0. So JoopyGoopy doing the right thing here, clearing off his opponent's board and just trying to do as much damage to face as he possibly can while he still has the chance to. Crowa continuing to play more taunt minions on the board, making it more difficult for JoopyGoopy to get damage on him, and just hoping that his Jiraxis weapon here, which is a 3 damage weapon that can attack up to 8 times before it loses durability, much like a sword is when it is used too frequently, or a cutting knife, and relying on his Inferno hero power to produce enough value once he has his taunt wall up to survive. JoopyGoopy is in a very tough spot here, as before Jiraxis was on play, he did not have a outright clock to try to deal with. Now he has a very real concern of not being able to break his opponent's damage dealing things before he dies. And unfortunately, he cannot send the full double Illidari Inquisitor towards his opponent's face, because after your hero attacks an enemy, the Illidari Inquisitor attacks that one as well. So he has the hero power to allow himself to attack, but he's still trying to figure out how to best send damage towards his opponent. He decides that the best play here is just to kill off the Rock Rager and hope that he can produce enough damage and enough value to kill his opponent before crowa52 floods him with just 6/6s and damage to his face. Another important thing to note is the Desperate Dreadlord has lifesteal, so when it does damage, it will restore health to your hero, making that clock and that goal for JoopyGoopy go even farther and farther away as he slowly drowns in the Lord Jiraxis value. So again, when the Warlock can control the board state until the late game, it has a very powerful position, and if it cannot control the till the late game, it just dies under the guns of faster decks. So right here we see JoopyGoopy putting up more taunt minions to try to protect himself, hoping for another turn or so where Crowa cannot kill him. But unless he finds some way to deal a lot of damage, it's not looking great for JoopyGoopy in the second game. Crowa, doing just like we said he was going to, is going to continue to try to attack through the minions, produce damage on board, and eventually try to outvalue and kill JoopyGoopy. So unless JoopyGoopy can really find something crazy, he will die to this board next turn. So JoopyGoopy, again clearing off the board, trying to produce more of a chance for himself to survive here. So the Throwglaive that we just saw being used is a Demon Hunter exclusive removal spell. It does 2 damage to a minion, and if it's removed, or if the minion dies, you get it back, much like a boomerang, and can throw it again until it bumps into a minion that it can't kill. So it's a very good piece of removal that Demon Hunter has access to. Unfortunately, it does not look like that's going to be enough for JoopyGoopy to stabilize and take this game later. Um, crowa52 has the damage on board to kill him, and it looks like he's just going to finish off the game here. So we will move to the third and final in this first place second division bracket between our two competitors here. So we will wait for the next game, and we will chat with you then. So this game here, the finals, both players are running back the decks that they were, or no, excuse me. JoopyGoopy is running back the mage list he was running in the first round, while crowa52 is running a list that we have not seen from him yet. This is his druid list. Now the druid lists we've seen in the past are either aggressive token druids or more late game focused ramp druids. Um, just based on the Cthulhu that we saw put into Crowa's deck, we can tentatively assume that this is a more late game focused deck. Again, we've seen this from JoopyGoopy before, as has Crowa in his first game. The hero power mage list here focuses on improving its own hero power, which is again that symbol right next to the character here with the health total. It costs 2 mana to do a thing unless you're Demon Hunter, which is special. We don't have to worry about that for our match here. So Crowa's game plan here is likely to control the early game with taunt minions and armor, which we've seen him doing already, and eventually outvalue JoopyGoopy with various Cthulhu pieces that we saw in the deck or other druid things. And JoopyGoopy's game plan, as we saw in the first game, is to improve his hero power and try to burn his opponent down with either large minions or direct damage spells. JoopyGoopy, trying to control the early game and taking that lead into the mid game, is continuing to play minions and clear off his opponent's things, while Crowa seems to be content just to play on the back foot more passively and just answer the threats as they come while putting up a wall of taunts to protect himself. Crowa is continuing to put minions on the board to challenge the early game. It looks like he doesn't want to forfeit it immediately. However, JoopyGoopy's hero power does line up pretty nicely with the threats that he's thrown on the board so far. We will see how this plays out, but if Crowa cannot stabilize pretty quickly, JoopyGoopy will begin to take a lead here in the early and mid game. JoopyGoopy, responding to the Divine Shield taunt that we saw from Crowa. This taunt has a death rattle, which, as we touched on earlier, has a trigger when the minion itself dies. This one draws your highest cost minion, so it's a very nice piece for a combo deck or a value-centered deck to play their 5-drop, which protects them, and then gradually get their more late-game pieces to set up nicely for that. However, JoopyGoopy, acknowledging this, played his Devolving Missiles, which transforms an enemy minion into a different minion of lesser value, and especially with the Tellian Fordring, the card that Crowa had on field. This transforming and removal of the death rattle as well as the taunt is a huge benefit for him. JoopyGoopy sticking with his game plan of controlling the board and dealing damage to Crowa before Crowa can figure out and stabilize and get to his late game pieces. Clears off the board with direct burn and then sends all of his minions to damage Crowa's health pool here. He's just hoping that the value pieces he has in hand are enough to outrace and outbeat Crowa's taunt minions. Grey Burrow here is a taunt minion that continues to cause problems. When it dies, it gives one of your other minions the ability to summon an additional Grey Burrow. So the interesting thing with this is if you play it correctly, it is an infinite taunt. It will continue to be a problem for your opponent. However, if you do not have another minion on the field, as Crow is seeing here, your Greyburrow will not summon another taunt and will just die naturally. So Greyburrow is a great piece to play if you have other minions on board, or you don't expect your opponent to be able to get rid of it. which Crowa, we can assume, did not expect Graybill to die that quickly. But JoopyGoopy, again, playing his mage things, just burns down all of the threats that Crowa can put on there. Crowa still sticking with his game plan of clearing off the board and creating taunt minions to protect himself. This turn, JoopyGoopy does not have an outright answer to it, so the freezing effect, which is something we've also not seen so far in our tournament, makes it so that the minion that is frozen cannot attack the turn that it's frozen for the next round. So JoopyGoopy, while he hasn't answered the taunt problem there, what he has done is ignored it long enough that hopefully he can answer it next turn or the turn after. So Crowa is continuing to play removal and produce taunts as we said he is. For JoopyGoopy, he is hoping that his value pieces again can answer all of this. He's just drawn his second Wildfire, which buffs up the hero power and improves his game plan further. He is, however, opting to discover and create new cards later, or first to see if he has more playables. He's taking more burn spells and more freeze spells, sticking with his mage theme. Again, the venomous scorpids here are scorpions, and they have poisonous, so this will allow them to trade pretty easily and effectively into Crowa's 52's large minions that he's using to protect himself. Crowa continues to gain armor and play for the late game. It will just be a race at this point. I think each player has settled into their roles pretty soundly, and it will just be a matter of who draws the better cards faster and who can play them more effectively and with better timing. We also see JoopyGoopy playing and finding his final late game piece here in Mordresh Fire Eye. This is the card that we saw in his first match, which did 10 damage to all his enemy things. This was the winning card the last game, and we will see how much of an impact it has here. So right here, JoopyGoopy is using that Muldresh Eye of Fire again, and that is enough to clear off Crowa's taunts and get enough damage to go face. So your first place for Division 2 is JoopyGoopy, and your second place is crowa52.